All issues discussed on the following podcast are specifically relevant to Memphis and unincorporated Shelby County, including Arlington, Germantown, Lakeland, and Millington. Other jurisdictions, including Bartlett and Collierville, may have policies and procedures which differ from those discussed here. Check with your local building department to determine their requirements. Now, please join us for the Building Beat.
Welcome to the Building Beat. My name is Breana Miller, your host for this episode. Today, I'll be talking to Tony Pellicciotti of LRK about his experience as an architect, working with our division, and working on historic building projects in Memphis. Thank you for joining me, Tony.
Oh, thank you, Breana, for having me.
Absolutely. So please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, absolutely. I moved to Memphis in 1976. Started first grade at Winchester Elementary School, and it's been a blast ever since. I came from a military family where Dad got off of active duty and settled in Memphis. It was quite interesting because he was a helicopter pilot and also a fixed-wing airplane pilot. And he found employment here with an accounting firm that traveled all over the country. And what they were intrigued by is he was both an accountant and a pilot. So he got to perform dual duty. He got to fly them where they were going. And as opposed to the regular pilots who then go play golf while the accountants do their work, he also got to do the accounting and then fly them back home. But it worked for us. So I am a Germantown High School graduate, went to University of Memphis. Well, let's be honest, it was Memphis State back in 1993.
Of course.
When I graduated, met my wife there through the arts program as well as through the architecture program. It's interesting. I also went back in 2020 to actually get my architectural master's. So it's kind of the educational history. And through that process, I started working with Looney Rick's Kiss, LRK, 6 months out of school and have been there ever since. And sometimes, this is fresh on my mind because we're getting back from career fairs at a bunch of different schools where we go and try to encourage aspiring young architects to come to Memphis and be a part of our firm. And when you stop and realize that these architects are somewhere between 22 and 24 years old, and you tell them you've worked in one place for 30 years, you have to stop and pause and think, wow, I wonder how that comes across. But the reality is, and it's been an incredible place that I've learned from, I've grown from. It's been, just surrounded by incredible people. And the number one thing that I think has really blessed me and been a part of why I have enjoyed the tenure is the focus on building community. And I think that's exactly what you in the city are also geared to do.
I would say that's also part of our mission statement is investing in building community. That's
what it's all about. To me, historic preservation is an adaptive reuse of old building stock is one of the primary things I have focused on in my career. And it really comes from that community thing. There's nothing that strikes an emotional chord more with the community than taking something that has been, at one time was beautiful, was very much a contributing asset to the community that fell into decay, fell into blight and despair, and then suddenly gets resurrected.
Right.
I mean, I think about Crosstown Concourse, which was an 8-year process.
Oh, wow.
And I say 8-year process, there's no end. Crosstown Concourse isn't evolving constantly. It's a dynamic institution. And hats off to Todd Richardson and McLean Wilson and Tony Bologna and everybody who on the development team made that happen. But it's the perfect example of how when we got started, everyone assumed, everyone, I might even put myself in this category, that this was an impossible task, that there was no way this would actually be able to be accomplished. And, fast forward through 8 years of design and construction, and you get to the end, and on opening day, you recognize just how powerful that is for the community. You watch the thousands and thousands of people that enjoyed the building, that embraced the building, that made it their own, and how it's evolved over the last 5 years since it opened, 6 years. And you think, I mean, that's a gift. That is a true gift to be able to have that kind of impact on that number of people.
Absolutely. And they have some of the before and after pictures in one of the hallways. And it's truly remarkable to see, these older pictures of when it was an active, thriving building, and then these current pictures of also being an active, thriving building. So that connection is pretty remarkable.
Absolutely. And, you take a really bad day when everything's going wrong, and you go drive over to Crosstown and you sit in the lobby for a while and you just watch the people, and you watch the diversity of people. And I mean it in every possible way: the socioeconomic, the racial, the religious, the liberal, the conservative. It is such an incredible mixing place of what Memphis is, and the example of how we can do it at the highest level possible. And I'd say, tying back into, the city and the planning and the zoning and the building department and all of the different people, when you zoom out, we frequently talk about, the development team being, this relatively large group of people. It wasn't an individual that was pushing this forward. It was a collective team. And then on the design side, at its height, we had 138 different professionals, being engineers, architects, interior designers, whatever. There was 138 people on our side that were working to make this a reality. But there are also a tremendous number of people on the city side, from the approval process through, I can tell you, some of the most influential pieces of my career have been spent in the building department. Mm-hmm. There is a commonality with trying to renovate historic old buildings that are, in all kinds of different states of disrepair, and bring them back to life, make them contributing parts of the community again. And it's different than working on a new construction project.
Right.
New construction, you've got a blank piece of paper in front of you. You maybe have some ideas that a client gives you, and you create all this, you birth all this from your brain, from your mind, and it could be anything. And for a lot of people, designers, that's very freeing, and that's what they embrace because it gives them the utmost creativity. For me, the constraints of that existing building are what I need to function at my best, because now it takes away the intimidation of it being anything, and it puts some real constraints in that have to be worked around and that need to be respected. And that for me becomes the catalyst of the creativity of, okay, we have A, but we want to get to Z. How do we work the magic in between? And how do we really make this what it can be, maximize its potential? And there's so much of that is not clearly and easily aligned with the regulatory environment that exists. It takes a thoughtful interpretation of, this is the purpose behind the rules. This is the intent behind the rules. And then a conversation about how those rules best get applied in this situation. And that's an ongoing conversation. And I can tell you that going back, I'll date myself, kind of like working in one place for 30 years, the beauty of having worked with people like Terry Hughes when he was the administrator of the building department. He taught me so much about the process that it's not a problem. It's not something you're trying to get around or find a way to avoid. It really is a framework to helping solve that problem. And it gives you, if you read the text literally, it gives you tremendous flexibility in how you approach a problem.
Right.
What you'll find in what Terry taught me was the building code can be very prescriptive. Take 2 aspirin, call me in the morning. Yeah, that kind of thing. It's right there if you want to go that path. Mm-hmm. But also at the very front end of the book, it says that there is no prescriptive requirement per se, that you are free to pursue and propose alternative means and methods that give equivalent protection in the building official's best judgment. Mm-hmm. So what that says to me, what Terry taught me is, okay, let's honestly appraise a situation. Let's understand what we're trying to achieve. Let's understand the public safety aspects of what we're trying to achieve. Let's understand the aspirational goals of what we're trying to achieve. Let's think about the protection of property, because building codes are about life safety, but they're also about protecting property. And let's take all these considerations and kind of work them to find, if it's a Venn diagram, work them to find that magic center spot that solves all of them. I can tell you, countless hours of working with him through those kind of problems. But then what we've had is a tremendous series of really powerful leaders through that space.
Right.
So following Terry, who's still a good friend, we still work and we challenge each other on code things even today while he's in private practice. But he was succeeded by Alan Medlock. And Alan had that same approach of let's figure out what the problem is and how we best solve it.
Right.
And I'll tell you, we work all over the country, and that is not the typical mindset. That is a very proactive, constructive, pro-development, pro-city, and pro-historic rehab that doesn't always exist.
Right.
There's so many jurisdictions where it's impossible to even get a face-to-face meeting with the decision makers in the department because of all the gatekeepers, all of the pieces. So I know Rita Anderson's taking that position now, and it's a healthy challenge, and I look forward to helping her in that same kind of capacity that these guys have helped me in the past of learning how to work through and facilitate some of these things that are needed in historic buildings.
Well, I'm glad that you're able to share with us that collaboration is something you've been able to find with our division.
Absolutely.
I'm so happy to hear that.
These renovation projects, the Tennessee Brewery, the Chisco Hotel, the Crosstown Concourse, the 19th Century Club, they wouldn't happen without that collaboration.
So speaking of some of these previous projects, you mentioned a few. What are some other projects that you've worked on in terms of restoration and adaptive reuse?
Well, I think I first got into the space with what we call Toyota Center at the time. If you think back to downtown Memphis in 1997.
Oh, so I was really young.
We'll go back a day or two. The ballpark was an idea. It wasn't a reality, AutoZone Park. And part of the idea of the ballpark was not just to create a sports venue. That could have been done. It could have been done anywhere. And there were arguments about whether that was more appropriate out in the suburbs, and if so, which suburbs, or if that's in the city. The vision was about using the sports as a catalyst for redevelopment, for activity, for energy, for life downtown. And that was kind of how we got involved in, we're not sports architects. We are about building community. So if it's just a sports venue, we could do that, but there are experts who do that all day. We're happy to help them. But if you're going to make it about building community, that's where we're experts. And so we partnered up with a sports firm, and we did that development together with Dean Jernigan. But it wasn't just a ballpark. It was the apartments in the outfield, Fielder Square overlooking it at the time. It was what's now a press box loft overlooking the ballpark. It was renovation of the condos in the YMCA in the outfield. It was the parking structure because, we're going to have it. At the time, it was 14,000 seats, and it was frequently sold out. So where are we going to park all those cars? Well, we're going to park a limited number there next to the building because we do need some convenience. We want some convenience. But more importantly, we want those people to park further away and filter out into the community and spend some time downtown. We want them to eat at Huey's or Automatic Slims or whatever restaurant is important to them. We want them to embrace those entrepreneurs that are already down here. We want them to explore and understand what makes downtown Memphis so unique a place, what makes it special. And then part of what makes it special is them being here.
Right.
So how do we build off of each other? Well, also as part of that, Toyota Center is what it was called at the time, was the historic William R. Moore dry goods store. It had been abandoned for, I want to say, the better part of 30 years. Wonderful, fabulous building. We have our headquarters in it today, and have been there ever since. Redevelopment. But the opportunity came up where Rob Norcross, who's a dear friend, who was the architect for LRK on the ballpark, as well as FedEx Forum and so many other tremendous projects. He says, Tony, we've got this handful of projects. Which would you like to tackle? And who amongst us doesn't want our boss to seek our input about what jobs we prefer to do?
Right.
That's part of why you hang around for 30 years in a place. But, I looked at the options and said, there's a piece of me that developed an appreciation for bringing old things back to life with a series of old cars, old Mustangs that I started with when in high school. I bought a 1966 Mustang as soon as I turned 16. And the car was way too pretty, way too nice, and way too fast for a 16-year-old boy to drive. I proceeded to tear that car up.
What?
As so many teenagers do. But I stumbled across a really beautiful moment. And this is serendipity. This is divine providence. This is a story of how one individual helping another can make such a huge difference in that person's future, but in so many people's future moving forward. So there was a substitute teacher in high school in physics class, and we had gone through all the prescribed classwork, and we're just sitting talking because she's very social, and what teenage kids, high school kids don't want to sit and talk as opposed to memorize metrics or study physics. She started talking about her husband that had an old Mustang that he had restored and was showing at a car show that weekend. And the wheels started turning. Okay, there's a connection here. There's somebody who likes old Mustangs, actually knows how to restore them. I've got one that I've torn up. Insurance has given me X number of dollars to fix it. It's not enough to fix it. Maybe there's something here. So I raised my hand and said, hey, you think there's any chance your husband would want to help me work on this car? And she says, I don't know. I'll ask him. And then I got a phone call later that said, hey, my husband's game if you want to bring the car by this weekend. Mm-hmm. So I brought it by on a Sunday afternoon, and the guy fell in love with it because it was a rare and beautiful car, absence the damage I'd done to it. Mm-hmm. And he immediately started working on things and fixing things that afternoon. Well, he struck a deal with me that was just absolutely, it's hard to wrap your imagination around. He said that he would help me take that car apart, fully restore it, put it back together for $200. So imagine it's not hard to spend more than $200 at dinner for your family. Mm-hmm. For $200, he would help me take it apart, put it back together, if I did all the labor and I bought all the parts. Mm-hmm. So his teaching was $200. Well, I was game. Sure, let's go. Mm-hmm. I did not know what I was volunteering for. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure he knew what he was volunteering for, because this was a process that took 6 months. Wow. Every evening, mm-hmm. from 5 o'clock to 10 o'clock, mm-hmm. every weekday evening, all day, every Saturday, and then every other Sunday we would work. Mm-hmm. And when that car rolled out of his garage, it looked, showroom new. Wow. And it immediately, the next weekend, went into a car show at the local convention center and placed third place.
Oh, wow.
So I was hooked. Not only was my broken car fixed, mm-hmm. it was beautiful. It was award-winning and recognized. And I learned how to do it myself. Mm-hmm. So there's pride. There's a level of pride that's hard to describe. So take that and marry that to the opportunity to do a building.
Yes.
And it's just taking it to the next level.
Yeah.
So when Rob Norcross said, which project would you like? I jumped on the historic rehab project and said, I see correlations here. Let's give it a shot. And that started, I think Toyota Center was 1997. And so I've been doing it ever since.
That is incredible. Almost like a pure connection between you learning the value of what you have and working with it, and then applying that to the work you do now.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
And it's a simple correlation. There's a number of programs that are being pursued throughout the city, some through government, some through nonprofit agencies, trying to encourage kids to get involved in things that they can learn and then grow into professions. That it's not, for architecture, that does absolutely come through a college education and through that process. But the seeds for where I'm at today started with working on that car.
Right.
So take, some of our kids that are challenged and doing things that are maybe just exactly the same thing I did back in the day, maybe through a different outlet. But how do we get them involved in activities, things, processes that then use their inherent creativity, use their inherent energy, and propel us to new places? A little bit off topic, but couldn't resist.
No, that absolutely adds to my next question for you, which is the Sterick Building.
Oh, yes.
One of your current projects. Can you tell us what are your thoughts about the Sterick project thus far? How's it been?
Well, Sterick is envisioned to be catalytic, much like Crosstown, or much like, if you drive by the Tennessee Brewery and you look at what Billy Orgel's done in that community, in that setting, it's changed radically. And so that's the same type of aspirations that we have for Sterick. And Sterick's got lots of challenges, just like every one of these projects did. But the beauty is in finding how to solve those challenges,
right?
And how to take those things that seem like hindrances, seem like liabilities, and actually make those the things that give it that raw, that unique, that character that resonates so well. The incredible thing about Sterick has really been the story of how Stuart Harris and his development team have acquired the building. Because honestly, we've looked at it several times in the last 15, 20 years, and we're not the only architects that have looked at it. The problem has always been, and the obstacle has been, the land was owned by one entity, the building was owned by another. And there was a lawsuit between the two entities based on the fact that it was a 99-year ground lease. The ground lease was getting close to time to roll off. At the end of the 99-year lease, the physical building itself changes ownership from being the entity that owns it, and it's transferred to the people that own the land. However, there's a caveat, and I've heard it described in various ways, but they all come to a similar type of essence. The building had to be turned over in good operating condition, Class A condition. There's various different terminology that was used. I never saw the actual lease, but it's a logical type of lease requirement. Then when I get that property back, I want it to be in good shape. Well, we could all look at Sterick right now.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed much in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And it's not what anybody would call Class A or good shape. So solving that challenge was, a stroke of brilliance where Stuart was able to negotiate a transition where he would buy the land, but then he would also get the building owner to sell him the building in a manner that makes sense. So the building owner has access to relatively inexpensive cost of capital. And so part of the deal is, you buy the building, but they then agree to finance the renovation of the building at this lower capital price, which then, it helps everybody. It gets them out of a lawsuit. It gets a liability off their books. It keeps the property owner from, inheriting essentially what would be a big liability. So it avoids them having to take ownership of a liability that environmental court and DMC and the planning department, everybody is all over because it should be beautiful.
Yes.
It's not. So solving that was just a stroke of genius. On the physical side, it has many of these same type of challenges that we talked about with that we're going to end up meeting with the building department. So we've walked it with the fire department together to kind of look at some of the aspects. The stairs are safe, in my opinion. They've been there for 100 years. They've been used for most of the 100 years and worked really well. They don't meet the prescriptive code for new construction. The risers, the technical dimensions are slightly different, but does that really mean it's not safe? At the same time, there's no physical, practical way, certainly not in preserving the historic fabric, but even just the physical act of how do you take a stairwell out of an existing high-rise and replace it with a new stairwell? It's not practical, and it keeps redevelopment from happening.
Yeah.
So the point of walking through with the fire department, with the building department is you look at these things and you make a judgment. We could all tell if a stair was, straight up. That's probably not a good egress situation for the public in a panic. Whether I'm wearing high heels, whether I'm wearing sneakers, going up a ladder is not a safe way out. Mm-hmm. But we can walk the stair and we can all see that it works just like the stair in our house, just like the stair in the buildings that we work in. Does a half inch here or there make a significant difference? We're working through those type of aspects. The other, with the end goal, making it functional, making it realistic to redevelop, and also making it safe, because everybody's goals are perfectly aligned. Mm-hmm. The other pieces that make it a challenge are it has a low floor height. It was developed before there was air conditioning, which is beautiful in some ways because you can open windows on both sides of the building and let the air flow through, and you don't need to have air conditioning. Mm-hmm. However, Memphis in August and September gets kind of uncomfortable.
A little bit. Yeah.
So it will never function without having modern infrastructure systems added to it. So that's one of the things we're currently working through is how you do that in a manner that preserves the character of the building, but also makes the ceilings a functional height. And I think we've got a really good answer that will come out here in the near future. I'd also tie into, if you don't mind humoring me, the vision is for, just like the ballpark, the vision is for more than just the individual building. The vision is for how that building redeveloping can be a catalyst for the neighborhood around it. And so, Stewart, you may or may not know, was the person and the vision behind the Commonwealth, which is one of the more beautiful historic rehabs that have happened in town. And he did just an amazing job. So he's going to bring that same level of attention, that same level of detail focus into the Sterick Building. And that's encouraging. But there's vacant land, there's surface parking lots in between. So what he is really passionate about is making it more than the building, but making that an entire thriving community. Just like the ballpark extended the footprint of downtown to the west into areas that were, forgotten about, that people wanted to avoid because it was surface lots. It was all kinds of the bad things that we use zoning to try to keep out of our neighborhoods, but had gotten in here over time. So Stewart, using that same kind of model, it has more positive stuff around it, ancillary uses, but how do we transition it all to becoming a thriving environment, a thriving neighborhood where people want to be?
I walked past the Sterick Building on my way to a number of Redbirds games and have always wondered, what does it look like inside? Do you have any memorable rooms, areas inside the building now that you've been over it?
Oh, it's as we walk through it, every day we learn, we find something new that we didn't experience before. But it is a time capsule where they literally locked the doors and walked away. There are pieces of immense beauty from the late 20s, early 30s that has the Art Deco character that you would expect, like the doorknobs and the base plates for the door hardware are fabulous. Stewart's in the process right now of taking those out of the building and getting them restored and keeping them in a safe place for fear of them walking off during construction. But because the building lived up until the early 80s, there's all kinds of every different trend, every different aesthetic movement that happened in those 50, 60, 70 years is represented there. Mm-hmm. So there are office environments that have red shag carpet.
Oh wow!
Where the carpet's still in there. There's green shag carpet because to me that's part of growing up in the 70s. But not things you see in buildings today. There's some magnificent 60s type retrofit that are, mid-century modern interpretations. And it's fun to just, walk through and think about the history and the things that have taken place here. There are there are names on the doors. And I'm not going to quote any in particular because I think that's there's some upcoming events planned around this. But you walk through and you recognize that at one point in time, this was the premier address downtown.
Right.
And the names on the doors are consistently prominent Memphis families that you're like, oh, wow, I see that name. I know who that is. Mm-hmm. And you start to make these connections about, just the depth of community connection these families have had over the years, and how bringing this building back ties into that emotion and that human capital.
That's incredible. How long do you think this project may take? I know that's a loaded question.
They always tend to take a little bit longer than you would expect. So the design process is going to be roughly a year, and then the construction process is probably a couple of years. So we've had a team in the building that scanned all the spaces with lasers. So we have accurate as-built measurements. Dating myself again, you go back to the start of Crosstown in 2010. That technology was just emerging. Mm-hmm. So we measured all 1.5 million square feet of Crosstown by hand.
Oh my God!
With tape measures.
Wow.
It is much, much more accurate and much more fun to see some guys set up laser equipment, hit a button on a computer, and come back with 1 million touch points where that laser measured every inch of that space.
Amazing.
And it can pick up the thickness of wallpaper. It can pick up all the different variations that actually make it look like a photograph.
That's incredible. Well, this is such an exciting project. I know a lot of people, even in our some of our landmarks planners, are very excited about this project. But is there anything else, any parting thoughts you'd like to leave with us today?
Well, I think, go back to where we started. The magic is in the collaborative spirit in working together to achieve a goal. Even if that goal is something we all think might be a stretch, but it's been a very, very impactful process, and we appreciate being a part of it.
And we appreciate being able to work with you on these projects. Thank you, Tony, for joining me today.
Thank you, Breana.
I really appreciate your time, and thank you for sharing so much of your experience with us. And I think a lot of people are truly interested in what it's like to work with our division, whether it's the building department, whether it's our planners, zoning. And I think you introduced a really good perspective in that it's about collaboration. We want to achieve the same goals. We're not opposing at all.
Absolutely. And sometimes as designers, we might stretch too far. So there's a good, healthy balance.
It's all about balance.
Amen.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for listening to The Building Beat. Thank you for listening to The Building Beat. Executive producers are Director John Zena and Deputy Director Nadia Logan Robinson. Associate producer is me, Breana Miller. Special thanks to Ina Esco, artist in residence with the Memphis Library Foundation and the Memphis Public Libraries. The song featured in the show is Hush by the Mason Affair. This is a production of the Memphis and Shelby County Division of Planning and Development. To learn more about this podcast and our work, visit our website at develop901.com.